Welcome to today's episode of the Behavior Science podcast, where we dive deep into the fascinating world of behavioral science, neurobranding, and psychology of influence. I'm your host, Dipankar, and today we have an extraordinary guest joining us, someone whose expertise has shaped the way marketeers communicate and engage with their audience. Nancy Harhut is a world renowned behavioral science expert and a leading authority on how human behavior impacts decision making. As the Chief Creative Officer of HBT Marketing, she has helped brands unlock the secrets of consumer behavior to create compelling high conversation campaigns. Her immense work has earned her acclaim across the globe, and her insights have been featured in major industry publications, conferences, and of course, in her latest must read book using behavioral science in marketing. Today, we'll be exploring the art and science behind behavioral triggers, how subconscious cues can nudge decisions, and why understanding the whys behind consumer choices is more critical than ever. So get ready to delve into a conversation full of actionable insights as we welcome the brilliant Nancy Harrod to the show. Welcome, Nancy, to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here. And that was a lovely introduction. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Nancy. So the purpose of this podcast, Nancy, is definitely, as we all know, that the psychology of influence, neurobranding, marketing, and of course, how human behavior works and how we take decisions in terms of business and otherwise as well. But typically, we will be revolving around the luxury market, how the D2C brands, especially these days, the online D2C brands can leverage the importance of the same subject, which you have written the book on behavioral science, of course. So my very first question to you, I'm going to shoot with the very first question: behavioral science and luxury marketing, Nancy. So what are your thoughts in that regard? Because we have heard a lot about on the mass market and the value brands, but today let's just have a bit of a talking on the quality brand side as well. So Nancy, what are your thoughts so that we'll delve deep into that?
Sure. So I think, some of the behavioral science principles that apply to any market also apply to the luxury brands. Not all of them do, but there's a small subset that does, because when you think about it, when people are making decisions, they're not always making these well thought out, well considered decisions. They're uh, cruising along on autopilot. They're responding, reacting instinctively, reflexively, and based on hardwired behaviors. And so, if luxury brands can trigger some of these hardwired behaviors, it puts the brand in a much better place to get response, to get engagement. And I think there are four key ways that a luxury brand can do that. And the first is coming down heavily on scarcity, specifically scarcity and exclusivity, because behavioral
Yes.
scientists have found that humans value things that are scarce. We place greater value on things that are scarce. So whether it's a limited quantity or a limited time to get something, or whether it's an item that is limited to only certain people, right? It's not available to everyone. It's only available to a certain group, and that makes people feel special. It makes them feel exclusive, and it makes them want that particular brand or that particular product. So definitely is the opportunity. We have the opportunity to leverage scarcity and exclusivity, because again, people value things that are scarce. The second thing that a luxury brand can do is really embrace the idea of storytelling, because stories are engaging, they're involving, and they also have an interesting impact on the brain, right? So stories allow people to draw their own conclusion. And while we might argue with what a marketer tells us, we rarely argue with our own conclusion. So if you can provide the story behind the brand, why it was crafted the way it was, why it was engineered the way it was, why it was manufactured the way it was, that adds value. There were a group of journalists who actually became researchers, and they created something called the Significant Objects Project. And what they did is they went out and they bought all of these random things that people were selling at tag sales, garage sales, flea markets, just things people wanted to get rid of. And then they wrote a story about them. And then they put the object along with the story on eBay. And they were very clear about the fact that the story was just a story. It wasn't meant to be true. But they got a tremendous increase in terms of the return on their investment. If they paid maybe 59 cents for an item, they were able to sell it for $49, right? They got this huge increase. And what they found was stories add value to a product. So while their particular experiment didn't involve luxury goods, what it did prove was that the story behind the good actually increases its value. Because if there's a story, we can tell ourselves what the story is, we can tell our friends and our family what the story is, and it just makes that good, that brand, that product different than everything else. And different in this case is better. So there's that value there. And then uh, the third of the four areas that people can embrace is the idea of implicit egoism, which is this notion that when we think about ourselves, when we define ourselves, it's not just basic demographics. I'm a woman of a certain age and I live at a certain place. It's also larger than that. We think about certain attributes that we have. Maybe we like to be thought of as a progressive person or a kind person or a discerning person. But as a result, what we do is we gravitate towards brands that reflect how we like to be seen. And so when you have a premium brand, a luxury brand, that's going to attract people because that allows them to kind of reflect who they are. It's an extension of who they are. It just kind of it's a positive self-association. If I buy this brand, if I'm a customer of this brand, that says something about me. And then the fourth and final area that I think is really a good spot for luxury DC brands uh, to tap into is the idea of input bias. And input bias is this decision-making shortcut that people have where we equate the amount of time or effort that goes into the development of the product as a proxy or an indication of its quality. So if a lot of time or effort went into creating something, we think it must be right. So it's kind of nicely paired with storytelling because when we have the story behind something, it increases the value. And if part of the story is the amount of time that it took to craft something, the number of stitches that went into something, the person who's been doing this for 20 years and they're only one of a handful of people who can create something, that just adds to the richness of the story and it makes the person, the customer value that product even more because of the input, the effort that went into it. So I think those are four areas: the idea of scarcity and exclusivity, storytelling, implicit egoism, and input bias that a D2C luxury brand can embrace or tap into in order to better connect with their customers.
Okay, so I think so the luxury consumers they don't tend to buy just the product; they want to buy the story behind that. In a nutshell, I mean, of course, if the product is scarce and they have the story in combination, so they are buying as a whole thing. It's not just the product they are buying. Is it?
It's,
Is it the case?
it's Yes, I think that is the case. It's not just the product, it's the story that envelops the product, that wraps around the product, because they might be able to find a similar product elsewhere, different
Hmm.
brand, less money, but it doesn't say the same thing. It doesn't have that same prestige. It doesn't
Correct.
reflect on them the same way. It's not as hard to get. All of those things, as you say, that wrap around that brand make that brand or that product so much more desirable. It's not just the product; it's everything that surrounds it. Yes,
Okay. Wow, that's quite interesting to be honest. But since we are talking about the luxury D2C brand, how we can craft a luxury brand into sort of online and give a D2C experience? Because traditionally, what we have seen, all these the brands, without taking name of any particular brand, they have their their stores in a very high street markets, very up end market. But these days, startups and all the new brands they're coming up with the online, and people are buying as much as they want to go to a store and they want to buy over there. So how we can craft the overall experience of the store into a luxury segment and make a beautiful D2C segment for the luxury consumers and the
sure. I mean,
businesses.
that's a great question because things are moving more and more online. But when you think about it, if someone were to go to the physical store, it would all be about the experience, very tailored experience. You'd feel very special. You'd feel taken care of, right? So a very easy experience too would make it very frictionless, very seamless. And so what we want to do is we want to take that and we want to transfer it online so that when people go online, they still feel very special. They still feel very taken care of. They still feel that things are being curated specifically for them, that they're having a tailored experience. So It might be a case where when you go online, certain special offers come up and you feel that they're just for you or for a very few people like you. So just as if you'd walked into a store and the salesperson recognized you and greeted you and said, "Oh, Dipankar, we have something that just came in that you would be interested in." The same thing kind of happens online when you pop up or when you enter this online store. There could be a pop up that says, "Ah, this is just for you or just for people like you." Live chat where somebody can consult with you and help guide you through the experience, or certainly the ability to customize things. You're not just perhaps buying something that everybody else can get. You can put your own little touch on it. You have an opportunity to tailor it or to customize the thing that you're going to get, the product you're going to get. There could even be a password protected part of the site where only certain people gain access, which underscores the exclusivity. And in that special password protected portion of the site, maybe that's where uh, certain products are available and you can only get them there, or there are opportunities for you to access content that isn't available to everyone. So just underscoring that specialness and that exclusivity. You might also, with your special customers, give them advance notice of maybe a new product that's coming out or a new iteration of the product, so that they can get it first, because that also feeds into the idea of scarcity and exclusivity. We love to have information or products before other people do. That feeds into this whole luxury brand. And then certainly the aesthetics of the site. When you walk into a store, a brick and mortar store that's very high end, that's luxury, it just
Mhm.
exudes a certain look, right? There's a certain design aesthetic. And so we would want to do that with our online stores, with the color scheme, with the typeface that we use, the fonts, just the way the site is laid out, the photography that we use, the way photographs are taken. We just want to make sure that the design, the look, the aesthetic is is high end, so that when you're there, you feel like you're in a very special place. You feel like you're not in, a store that anybody could gain access to, but you're in a specific spot that just exudes luxury and an upscale feeling. So these are all ways that we can transfer that experience. And we talked about making it easy, so we'd want to remove friction. Maybe we want to have free shipping, maybe free returns, but anything to make it easy. Because if it's a luxury brand that you were trying to attract people to, it would be about tailoring that experience and removing any friction and making that person feel taken care of, very well taken care of, actually. And that's the kind of thing that you know justifies that premium price, and that gets people to return, frankly.
Yeah. So at the same time, I was just looking at the websites of, say, LV, Gucci, Dior, and all these brands. I can name n number of brands of like of these, but they have a very the website is something that is very aesthetic in the sense that all the other brands like the massy brands, they also have the very good websites, but the website they have, they're very spacious, white and black. These are the commonalities I have seen in those websites. So from the influencing point of view, from the psychology point of view, I mean, what are your thoughts, Nancy, on that note, and how consumers, not consumers, but how the businesses can leverage those startup brands, startup luxury brands can leverage those specific insights, from those websites and the psychology behind that?
Yeah, so I think what you want to do is, if you're a startup and you're aiming to be a luxury brand, there are a couple of things you can do. You can look at the luxury brands in your category, whether it's a Gucci and Dior, or whether it's another category. But you can look and you can say, okay, what are some of the things that as a customer I would find when I go to this site? What do I see? And we kind of make a list of the similarities and say, all right, I want to be similar to that, because immediately it will signal to people that when they enter my online store, I've entered, a store that's similar to some of these leading brand names, these luxury brand names. And then the other thing we want to do is we want to look at our startup competitors, and we want to see what they're doing, because we want to make sure that we differentiate ourselves from them. So it's a little bit of a balancing act, because on the one hand we want to look like the well-established luxury brands to signal to people that's the set that I belong to. But then we also want to make sure that we're just different enough from our competitors so that we don't get confused, particularly if we're a startup. We don't want to um, do anything that's going to make people think that if we covered up our logo, they might think they were at our competitors. So we want to be distinctive enough, whether it's our color choice, whether it's the amount of white space that we use, whether it's the approach that we take to photographing our products and showing them on the site. But we want to have a kind of a signature look that's both upscale and differentiating, so that when people are there, it feels like a different experience.
Okay, no, that's really interesting. But does the competition matter, Nancy, in the luxury segment? Because if I'm buying any luxury product, am I buying? I'm buying the story behind that, not the product. So how does the competition matter? For example, I need a Hermes bag, then there's a story behind that. Some Birkin, some bag is there. I'm not sure with the name. Some Birkin bag is there. There's a story behind that. So I do. I mean, if I have the money, I'm a luxurious consumer. I don't care what LV is selling, what other brands are selling, because I just want that story to be associated with me. So in that sense, I'm just very intrigued to understand from you, from the psychology perspective, does competition really matter? That much that matters in the value brands, which are very competitive. Let's say between $1 that makes a significant difference. So just want to understand from that perspective.
Sure. No, you're absolutely right. We buy into the story of the brand, and then, then that becomes the brand that's our brand that reflects our self-image and the story that we want to tell. But when you had mentioned if someone were just starting up, that was when I said, well, all right, then look at what your competition is doing. Because on the one hand, we're going to look at those well-established luxury
Hmm.
brands, and we're going to want to borrow from them so that people feel they're in the right, tier. But then if there's competition at your startup level, you want to make sure that since you're all scrambling for the same customers, the same new customers, you want to make sure that you're differentiated from your competition, which would be the new startups that are just entering the market as you are. And I think that's where the competition uh, matters, because if everyone is scrambling to get some of those same new customers, you want to sound and look and feel a little different. But then once they've bought into your story, you're absolutely right. Then it almost insulate you from your competitors, because your story is your own story, and that's the story that the customer has embraced, and it's almost impenetrable at that point.
Okay, well, that's a point well taken. And how about the expensive pricing strategies, Nancy?
About pricing strategies for luxury
Pricing
brands, is that
strategy
what?
for the luxury segment. The behavior science of the premium pricing strategies. So when they
Sure.
mark up when they mark up the pricing, as much premium as it could be. So what is the behavior science behind that? And consumers buy that. I mean, they stand up in a queue as well to sort of buy that product. So what is the behavior science behind that? Because uh, since beginning, since childhood, we have been taught, that way that this is cheaper. We are okay. We'll take what there. But in the luxury segment, it's purely opposite. So how does that work? I mean, how does the brain work in that sense for the luxury consumers and businesses?
Yeah, no, it's interesting because in some cases you're absolutely right. We look at our options and we're like, okay, this one is just as good and I can save money. And saving money is good because we don't like to, lose money by spending more for something that someone else got for less. So, but when it comes to luxury brands, the decision-making shortcut is more expensive equals better. We're not in a position maybe to really understand or to really judge the quality of one product over another. And so what we look at instead is the price. And a higher price is a shorthand way of saying this is going to be better. This is the one I want. And with it comes certain bragging rights. So when a certain set of people know what the price of that Birkin bag is, for example, then when you walk around with one, you're saying something to people. You're telling them that you have arrived. You're telling them that you belong to a certain social set without ever having to say anything. Just having that
Status,
bag,
status.
you know, it just projects it. Yeah. So higher prices is better. And behavioral scientists talk about something called magnitude encoding process. So not only is the price itself higher, but how you display the price can make it look even bigger. So when you're online, $1,000 in the upper left of the screen
Hmm.
seems like a higher price than that same $1,000 at the lower left of the screen, at the bottom of the screen, simply because it's upper on the screen, higher on the screen, it feels like a higher price. Lower on the screen, it feels like a lower price, even though $1,000 and $1,000 are the same, or $10,000 and $10,000. They're the same absolute number, but higher on the screen, it feels like a bigger price. Speaking of the same $10,000, if you showed it as, here in the US, dollar sign, 10,000, decimal point 00, that takes up a lot of space. If you
Mhm.
get rid of the decimal point 00, it takes up less space. The more
Mhm.
space something takes up, the bigger the price seems. So, in addition to just that shorthand of the more expensive it is, the better quality it is, there's also just how you display your prices, because the physical space that they take up and where they appear on the screen also suggests that they're bigger prices. And in this case, bigger is better. And then there's context. What you show your products next to, or where they are, makes a difference. In the offline world, there's a great example of Rolls Royce, very, very
Mhm.
expensive vehicle. Um,
Mhm.
but instead of going to car shows to try to sell their car, they would go to yacht shows. So
Yeah.
if you're at a yacht show and you're going to buy a yacht, spending a little bit more to pick up a Rolls Royce, no big deal, right? So where you kind of position your product and how you frame it, or what you anchor it against, could be very important, because suddenly it puts it into a whole new category. It's like people who are considering yachts are also picking up Rolls Royces. It adds to the value of it, and to the prestige of it. So how you display the price and how you anchor, or the context that you put that price in and that product in, also contributes to the perception of value.
And Nancy, in one of your, probably, I'm not sure if it's there in your book on the anchoring, or maybe in your one of your podcast, or you have shared some article on the LinkedIn. You mentioned that, on the anchoring side, that for example, on the pricing, specifically for the online. So if we are having the product ID, which is 10 digits ID, we can create 1 2 3 4 5 6, or n number of things, and our mind is anchored that, oh my god, there's a big digit, and we can just let's say we can sell a bag for $5,000, because there's an anchoring between there. So product ID is having a 10 digit, so it seems like it's a big digit, and the price anchoring, it is for 5,000. So probably, I've just seen somewhere, maybe in your book or your LinkedIn, in other podcasts. So I've just heard you before that. So what is the science behind that? So is it does it come under anchoring?
So yeah, that I mean, what's interesting is, the first number or price that people see becomes the anchor or the reference point against which they'll evaluate everything else. And so, what that could mean is you lead with your most expensive price, and maybe that's a little bit of sticker shock, as, oh my goodness, that's too much. But then the next one down becomes, oh well, that's not too bad. Whereas if you
Mhm.
lead with your least expensive and then you show your next expensive, people have anchored on that least expensive price, that low price, and the next one seems like, oh, that's a lot of money. So, generally speaking, we want to start with our highest price and work our way down, because the average revenue increase we'll get is, I think, there was a study that came out of, Colorado, in the States here, in University of
Mhm.
Colorado, and I think it was a
Mhm.
4.2% increase in revenue when you go high to low versus starting low and then ending on high. And then there have been some other studies that indicate that even exposing people to a larger number earlier on, before you mention your price, can put your price into context. So it could be the product number could be much larger. It could be the number of people who have, um, already purchased this, or the number of people on the waiting list, if we're looking for a large number and we're trying to be exclusive, right? But having a larger number and then revealing your price, if your price is a little bit
Mhm.
smaller, makes it seem more affordable. Which is a good thing. Although, as we're talking about luxury brands, we're also saying that high price equals quality. So, but on the other hand, people only have a finite amount of money, and it can make that high price seem more acceptable if previously people were exposed to an even larger number, and that number could be the product ID, it could be the number of people on the waiting list, it could be, um, the I don't know, number of products that have been sold worldwide or something. But it is interesting, yeah. So the first number that people see kind of influences the subsequent numbers that they are exposed to.
So the brain gets anchored to that particular number and they see it as pricing or whatever. So then they get confirmed or sort of agree on the price they want to buy, and they see the little number in terms of pricing and their brain gets anchored here.
Yes, you anchor on that large number and you compare every other number that comes up against it. That first number you see becomes your reference point, and then everything else you see is either higher or lower or the same. And so we make decisions based on that.
Okay, that's wonderful. So I think so scarcity and the price anchoring. So these are the very critical and very important to have in the luxury segment, so to speak. That is very important, isn't it?
Yes, scarcity is incredibly important. Scarcity, exclusivity, price anchoring is very important, and also the story, the storytelling, because
Storytelling,
as
yes.
earlier, people kind of buy into that story, and once they've bought into that story, that can make them incredibly loyal, and that story kind of becomes a part of who they are or who they want to be. And so it says something about them when they're a customer of a particular brand or when they display a certain product, because it's reflecting who they feel they are or who they want to be seen as. So the storytelling is important. The scarcity and exclusivity, the price anchoring, all of this helps fuel the success of a luxury brand.
And can we connect the story part with the mix of priming and the framing from your book? I mean the techniques you mentioned. So can we say that the story that we are saying? So in terms of behavior science or the language of psychology or the language of your book. So can we say that the story part is connected with the mix of framing and priming because our brain is getting primed with the words we are using or the pictures we are showing and the verbal cues or the videos and the pictures, how we are framing the language. So is it the part of everything, the story? Can we connect with that, Nancy? I'm very
Yes.
intrigued to understand that. Yeah.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I think the story can involve some of the input bias that we talked about, the amount of time or effort that goes into crafting the product, and it can also, as you point out correctly, involve framing, because the
Mhm.
words that we choose not only convey information, but they
Mhm.
influence how people respond to that information. So there are maybe two, but there are probably many ways you can say something, but let's say there are two ways you can convey information, and both sentences accurately convey the information, but one sentence makes somebody very interested in the product, and the other sentence not so much. The classic example would be, this glass is half empty, this glass is half full. How I describe it, it's the
Yeah.
same glass with the same amount of
Yeah.
liquid in it, but how I describe it
Yeah.
influences how you see it. So the way we frame uh, our sales story, the way we frame the benefits, the way we frame how someone is going to feel, and emotion is very key when it comes to purchase decisions, particularly with luxury products, but really across the board. We make decisions for emotional reasons. We justify
Mhm.
those decisions with rational reasons. So if we can
Mhm.
frame our products, our goods, in a way that suggests to people, I'm going to feel special. I'm going to feel accomplished. I'm going to feel like I've arrived. I'm going to feel good. That's really important. So rather than just explaining the product and what it does, if the story also includes some framing that suggests you're going to feel a certain way when you're using this product, wearing this product, carrying this product, displaying this product, that also feeds into it. And that framing can definitely make a difference. And it can get you to think
Wow.
about things differently. You might think, why would I spend that amount of money for that particular product? Certainly I can get it elsewhere for less. But then when you frame it a certain way, you suddenly see, oh, that's precisely why I would want to buy this product and no other. No substitute will work for me. So, how you frame things, the language you use to describe what it is you're offering can make a big difference. Yes.
Oh, that's so interesting, Nancy. I think I can hear you whole day sitting here. I can just hear you. I would love to hear your insights and your thoughts. I can hear because I keep seeing your podcast, your book. I mean, this is my favorite book on my table. I can't the using behavioral science in marketing. So you have written a book. I mean, you are a fantastic and a brilliant author, and you of course heading HBT marketing. So, Nancy, I just want to understand the future of behavior science from you. I mean, how do you see the future? I mean, in the sense that are more and more people coming in from the business side and they will be reading and they'll be knowing and they'll be using these tactics. And for example, if everyone knows about that, for example, me as a consumer, I would know that this business is doing that, priming, framing, storytelling, and all these things that we have discussed. How does that work? I mean, the question is divided into the two part. One, the future of behavior science in terms of business, and the second is as a consumer. I mean, if there's a lot of information on the digital medium, through digital medium, social media, your podcast, your book, every information is available. So of course, more number of people will be knowing about these subjects. So I mean, how does that correlate?
Sure. And first, thank you very much for your kind words about my book, Using Behavioral Science and Marketing. I appreciate that. So the future of behavioral science, it's interesting, and I guess it's anybody's guess. But in my perspective, I do see it growing. As you point out, it seems to be getting more and more attention. More and more companies are adopting it. You're finding behavioral scientists in the C-suite of companies, a chief behavioral scientist, chief behavioral science officer, senior vice president of behavioral science. So more and more companies are incorporating this thinking, which I think is wonderful. And I think as we continue to evolve, where the industry is going is we're going to start to see an intersection between data science and behavioral science. So the data science, particularly fueled by AI, artificial intelligence, but the data science is going to get very, very good at quickly telling us, you know, who we need to deliver which message to, where we can find them, and when we can find them. And the data science is going to help us with that. It's going to help us segment. It's going to help us determine, which offers go to which people, which messages go to which people, where to find those people, where, how to optimize our media spend. And then the behavioral science is going to tell us how to serve up that message, how to craft it or create it so that the words that we choose, the pictures that we use, the frames that we use, um, the phrases that we use do the absolute best job of getting someone to pay attention, having them understand what we're talking about, um, getting them to remember the message, and getting them to respond to it. And that's what the behavioral science is very, very good at. Those four things: noticing the message, understanding the message, recalling the message, and responding to the message. And so that combination in the future of data science and behavioral science is what I believe is going to really ramp things up for marketers, make marketers that much more successful, that much more efficient, and that much more effective. And then the second part of your question was,
On the
do
consumer side, a lot
people?
of information is available. I mean, these are the deep secrets of the behavior science, the that sort of world. If everyone knows that, wouldn't they be thinking that, okay, I'm being primed, this is storytelling, this is scarcity part, and they would be very calculative. And I mean, how does that work, Nancy?
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a very smart question. And here's the way I would answer it. Yes, it's absolutely getting behavioral science is absolutely getting more press, right? People are finding out about it. There are books about it and articles about it and podcasts about it. So yes, people are finding out about it. However, that said, um, for the most part, we cruise along on autopilot. There are some studies that show up to 95% of purchase decision making takes place in the subconscious mind. There are so many uh, things competing for our attention that very often we're cruising along on autopilot and we're responding instinctively, reflexively, automatically. We're not really thinking. Um, Daniel Kahneman, the late great Daniel Kahneman, who's a noted behavioral economist, and he wrote the book Thinking Fast and Slow. He won a Nobel Prize. He had a quote that was, "Thinking is to humans as swimming is to cats. They can do it, they just prefer not to." So if we were to stop, Dipankar, and say, all right, let me think about this. What's going on here? Do I really need this, or am I, falling victim to framing or priming? Am I being influenced by scarcity or anchoring? If we really stop to think about it, we might say, oh, wait a minute, maybe I don't need this. Maybe I can delay this purchase or go someplace else. But we don't often stop and think about it. We're cruising along on autopilot. I was and I just wrote this book, Using Behavioral Science and Marketing, right? So I'm on vacation. I walk into this restaurant and I sit down at the bar and I want a glass of wine. And I look at the wine list, and I like wine, but I don't recognize a single wine on the wine list. So I'm kind of glancing at them, wines by the glass. I don't recognize any of them. The bartender comes over and says, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd like a glass of wine. I want it to be red. I want it, to be a little leathery and have a lot of tannins. And, what would you recommend?" So he recommends the most expensive wine by the glass. And I looked at the
Okay.
price and I thought, maybe I would spend that on a bottle, but for a glass. So I said, you know what, I bet you it's really good, but I don't want to spend that much. What else would you recommend? And he said, oh, well, I'd also recommend this one. Next thing you know, Dipankar, he comes back with two glasses with a little bit in each one, and he's going to give me a taste of each. I didn't ask for it, but he
Mhm.
was like, here, here's the first one I recommended. Here's the second one I recommended. See which one you like and which one you want to get, right? So I taste them, and they're both good. But that first one he recommended, the very expensive one, it was very good. And I thought to myself, well, I am on vacation, and I suppose I could
Mhm.
splurge, and it is very tasty. So I ordered the more expensive glass of wine. That night, I get back to my hotel room, and I realize that was reciprocity. I didn't
Mhm.
ask for a taste, but he
Reciprocity.
gave me a taste. And the way reciprocity works is when someone does something for you, whether or not you ask for it, you now
Mhm.
feel obligated to do something back for them, to return the favor, to even the score, right? To kind of settle things, to get back onto level playing field. He did something for me, and I felt, oh, I better buy the more expensive one because he gave me a free taste of it. But in the moment, did I think that way? Was I thinking that through? I mean, I wrote the book, but no, I wasn't. I was just like, oh, it is good. And, I started to justify it. I'm on vacation. I can splurge. It's okay. So that's just a personal story that supports the idea that if we stop and think about it, sure, we might say, oh, that's scarcity, that's anchoring, that's priming, that's framing.
Mhm.
But very often we don't stop to think about it. We make the decision emotionally,
Yeah.
and then if we're asked, we have a very legitimate
Logic. Yeah. Yeah.
explanation for
Yeah.
why.
I'm very glad that you went to the vacation, you tasted a very expensive wine, and you made a decision to write a book thereafter. So, I'm really glad you did all of this.
Well, thank you.
So with this, Nancy, I would love to, sort of keep on going on this subject, but I would like to wrap up here. I mean, for our listeners, let's keep it that way. And I look forward to have you in another show. I mean, sometime very soon. So I'm just looking forward to you.
Well, that would be lovely. Thank you so much for today. I've really enjoyed speaking with you, and I'd be happy to continue the conversation another time. But thank you very much.
Perfect, perfect. That's so lovely. And listeners, that was Nancy Harrod for you.